So I've advanced to the 27th move of the game. It's about now that the game is really going to transform itself. And the idea is to give you a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with what's going on before the actual sacrifice that really warrants being watched. Okay, so black is Shredder and has just played Queen B6. And now it's white, Komodo Dragon. As you can see, he's got a pretty nice structure here. Pretty regular. Doesn't scream attack. And of course, black has a similar position, but has a little bit more space on the queen side. Still, it's white to play. So what does white play here? E4. And already we can see that this is beginning to change a little bit. Black looks at it, spends some time, about a minute. I do have the times per move here, and plays B3. Perfectly reasonable. How does white continue? E5. Knight D7. F4. And now we're beginning to see that the attack is starting to really go forward. But black isn't going to let him just get away with it. F6. Knight G3. F5. Essentially locking up the position a little bit. King H1. And we can already sense that that Queen H1 has a purpose. I mean, there's a bishop there after all. So what's the idea here? G6. And this is where everything goes crazy. Okay, what does white play here? Can you guess? Knight H5. Wow. Now, Knight H5 in itself isn't really that amazing. I mean, okay, the knight is hanging. And so what? I mean, after all, white isn't exactly threatening anything with that knight. Knight F6, Knight G7, I mean, so what? But that knight, as you will see, is going to be staying on that square, attacked by that same G6 pawn for the next 10 moves. I mean, that's just amazing, man. Think of it. It's like one of those action films where you have like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone going to this giant battlefield, everything going crazy, and then they come out of that battlefield without a scratch on them. That's the story of this knight. I mean, it's just something else. But the game is beautiful. Okay, so what does black play? Obviously, we know he doesn't take. He plays knight c6. But what happens if he does take? I mean, fine, he stays there for 10 moves, but why can't he take it? So the first question is, of course, why doesn't he take on h5 now? And I'll give you the answer. After g takes h5, queen takes h5, king h7. Now you have to remember that the g6 pawn, the g6 square, and the h6 pawn are being attacked. So there is a problem here. It's not an immediate problem, but it's a very fast problem, as we will see. King h7, g4. And everything goes bad here. Because now you have not just g5 square here, the f5 square here being attacked, but you also have this huge diagonal, and there's really no way to defend this pawn. The pawn on f5 is indefensible. There's one pawn, one knight, and everything's going to go crashing. It's being attacked 3 times, defended twice. There's no way to bring in another black piece. The house is going to fall apart. So, knight c6, a5. And the first question is, since we already know that g4 is really strong, why doesn't he play it immediately? And the reason is, and this is really interesting, after g4 immediately, after g4 immediately, knight b4. And it's attacking the bishop, and as it turns out, we really, really need that bishop for this attack to work. But white came up with this brilliant solution. Well, for an engine, it's probably nothing. I mean, I looked at it with a few other engines, and they all found it immediately. But for us humans, it's not so obvious. So how does white prevent black from attacking that bishop and taking it off? a5. This is a gorgeous move. So the idea, of course, is that if knight takes a5, then, of course, the bishop is not attacked. No problem. And the pawn is attacking the queen. So queen takes g4. And you're like, well, wait a minute. You didn't stop knight b4. Well, you did, just tactically. Now white plays bishop e1. And because the bishop on e1 is worth a lot less than that powerful bishop on d3, we're going to exchange that bishop here for that knight. And that was the whole point. With the queen on a5 and the knight on b4, bishop e1 works. Astonishing concept. Queen b6, bishop takes b4, queen takes b4, or bishop takes b4 actually. We need the queen protecting e6, as we'll see later. Rook g1. Already we can see that this is going to cause no end of trouble. I mean, we already have the g-pawn, the bishop on d3, the knight, and now we have, of course, the rook attacking through the g-file. Okay, king h8, g takes f5, e takes f5, and just in case you're wondering why not, g takes f5, rook g6, and yeah, you're just in trouble. Okay, so you can't protect h6, and in case you're wondering, well, why can't you? Because after this, rook g7 check, and we also win the knight on d7. Okay, so e takes f5, queen e2, rook c6. Why rook c6? I mean, g6 is only being attacked once, and it's not that big a deal. Well, the goal here is to free the queen from her defensive duties for more useful purposes, such as attacking d4, or even queen d8. Either of those squares will be much more powerful and much more useful for the queen than just defending the g6 pawn. I mean, think of it. Yes, the queen can defend it, but would you put an aircraft carrier to be a tugboat if you didn't have to? No. So, rook bd1, and the idea here, of course, is to have discovered attacks. Queen d8, queen g2, queen h4. Now, we're already at move 41, and now it's move 42. And knight h5 was played on 32. So 10 moves later, finally, black has managed to kick the knight off of h5. But as we will see, not for long, and the knight will be coming back to the attack very quickly. So knight g3, queen takes f4. I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound. Knight e2, queen e3, and honestly, queen h4 is not any better. All right. It really doesn't do anything. So queen e3, and frankly, I love this next move by white. I mean, I'm looking at this position from a human perspective. Understand it. And the first thing that comes to mind is we have this great attack on the g file. We have the bishop attacking f5. We might even have some nasty attacks with that queen on e3. I don't know if they work. What would you play here? Well, white repurposes his attack and is not at all stuck in the idea of the g file. So he plays, or it plays, rook gf1. This is really not an obvious move, at least not for me. The idea here, of course, is to be able to force a more powerful attack both on f3 as well as the knight on f4, which is coming right now. Bishop e7, knight f4, and now we see the main purpose of that rook on the f file. It's protecting f4 and ensuring that that knight is coming in to wreak havoc. So now we have it attacking two different nasty squares. g6, which is the most immediate threat, and of course d5. Bishop g5, effectively covering g6, since now without the queen attacking, we have just the rook, we have just the knight. Knight takes d5. Black's queen has only one square to go to, so queen takes d4. There's really no other square to go. And now the final win of material for white. Bishop b5, discovered attack. There was no way to avoid it. Queen h4, bishop takes c6, knight takes e5, bishop e7, a5, rook fe1, knight d3, and black finally resigned. A fantastic game by Komodo Dragon, which deservedly won the world championship thanks to this game.